Oh, thank you. All right, as she said, I'm Kyle Frazer. I'm a course director over in digital cinematography. And today we have Troy DeVolld, Frank Scheuring, and Rob Scribner. And we're going to kind of start with pre-production and go all the way through what it takes to work on independent features and different work. And I'm going to give these guys a moment to kind of tell you about themselves.
My name is Troy DeVolld. I work primarily in reality television. I've been a producer on shows like Dancing with the Stars and The Bachelor and Hollywood Game Night for about 16 years now. I have had some experience working in independent features at the absolute lowest end of the scale. I worked on a film for Troma in 2004 called Lolly Love with James Gunn and Jenna Fisher. I've also produced a couple of shorts that ran on NBC.com and Comedy.com over the years.
I'm Frank Scheuring, and I'm actually more of a sound designer, sound editor, mixer. At least that's what I did for my first almost 15 years. And I just completed, well, almost, it's still in color grading, but just finished the mix for my first feature-length documentary that I produced as well.
How you guys doing? I'm Rob Scribner. So I actually was a graduate about a year and a half ago. My thesis project was Warbird Pilot Behind the Visor. It just recently won at the ASC Heritage Awards, and I'm actually now the owner-operator of Sky Tower Films, and within my own company, I'm the director of photography, working with companies such as Sony and Rigid and whatnot.
All right, awesome. Thanks, guys. Yeah, let's clap. All right, so we'll start with pre-production. So if we could just kind of discuss the things that you can see in pre-production that you know you'll be able to head off for problems in production, or things that you might normally skip over in pre-production that can kind of help you in the future so that you aren't having horrible budget issues or talent problems on set.
I mean, the most critical thing that I've ever had to deal with is just making sure that your scheduling is as efficient as humanly possible. If you're going to do a day's worth of shooting, the idea that everything is happening in the same location that can be shot at that time makes a lot of sense. It makes more sense when you have someone that's in a full, prosthetic makeup. Don't have them in makeup and finished at 9 o'clock in the morning and not shoot with them for another 6 or 7 hours. Just kind of be aware that scheduling is almost 9/10 of pre-production as far as I'm concerned. Making sure that there aren't any weird legal issues you may have overlooked, that you're not making simple mistakes. If you're costuming, you need to be avoiding logos and things like that that are going to come back and bite you. All things that you should probably already know as part of what you're learning here at Full Sail, but those are the things that have always given me the most amount of grief, is planning your day and having everything sort of sorted out before you start.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Do you guys have anything too?
Yeah, I definitely would echo what he's saying, especially with the trying to shoot as much as you can in one location. And like for the film I just finished, we had we shot 6 interviews in 4 hours with 6 different setups, but it was in one building. And since we planned ahead, we were able to just knock them out, and get really good interviews. It was a quick turnaround. But there was something else I was going to say. When you said that, I was like, oh, that's brilliant. And then I forgot what the other one was, but I swear it was good.
One thing, like in the pre-production, whether it's my idea or if it's working for a corporate commercial or anything like that, is the very first thing I think about is, how's this thing going to be distributed? Like, what's our end goal? Actually, I was just in another panel earlier today where we were talking about that same thing. I feel like that's a lot of a lot of people don't plan for that. They just make the film and like, okay, great. I have no money now to get this thing distributed. What do I do? So just thinking about those things ahead of time so you can set a proper budget aside for, most people don't think about posters. They don't think about little PR packages and stuff like that. But it is really important to get your name out there. So.
Yeah, I actually just remembered what I was going to say. So, and I'm going to use my film as an example because it's the only thing I produced. If you're doing like a documentary where you have a lot of archival stuff and you're also interviewing, we really made a point to organize all of the archival material and go through it, like looking at all the pictures, looking at all the old video footage before we did the interviews, so that we could have pointed questions, and even took some of these old pictures to show these people that were interviewing. They hadn't seen these things in 30 years.
Right.
And it brings back memories. It makes it more vivid in their mind. So when they're giving their interview, it's going to be more detailed. It's going to be more interesting, more emotional, maybe.
Well, so since we're talking, I didn't do it. Since we're talking kind of about documentaries at the moment, for your, am I good? Okay, I lost my train of thought. So we're gonna skip that question that I had in my head. Since you were talking about budget, we'll go back to that way. There's this new thing called Kickstarter, and other sites like that where you can kind of raise money yourself to make your projects. Do you guys have experience with, finding a producer, finding people with money versus crowdsourcing? And do you think there's benefits, there's downfalls? What do you guys got on that?
I'm typically working for someone else. I'm very rarely producing material on my own. I did try to kickstart a documentary project some number of years ago that my goal was $25,000, and I figured I could put up the rest of the money. I raised $676 because I am the worst person on earth at getting the word out about anything. So we started, and $676 doesn't get you terribly far. And the documentary has sort of languished, and I've worked on it as time and resources allow. I think there's a tendency now to look to Kickstarter as sort of this crazy magic bullet, like I'm going to ask for this money, and it's going to materialize out of nowhere from strangers who are stumbling across, what I'm doing. I think having realistic expectations for Kickstarter, and even the folks that I know that have done it successfully, are raising money in stages. Instead of trying to raise $25,000, why didn't I try to raise 10 to get the thing underway, come back and have part of what I had produced to show, to raise the next bunch of money to get me into post-production, so it at least looks like the needle has moved, that there is a chance in Hades for this project to actually work. Mm-hmm. But just being aware of, there are a lot of platforms. Indiegogo actually worked a little bit better for me than Kickstarter. I don't know if it's because there's less traffic on it or what the deal is. But just don't look to it as sort of the magic fix. Have something of your own. At least be able to show some example of what your sweat equity is in the beginning, whether it's just being able to produce an imaginary trailer for the thing that you're trying to raise money for. That helps a lot if people have actual video to see. So,
I think one thing that a lot of people that plan on using Kickstarter or do use Kickstarter don't think about is that what you're doing is you're taking on a second marketing campaign for your film, because in order to have a successful Kickstarter campaign, you have to get it out there and push it and get it in front of people and consistently and kind of over to the length of the thing, 30 days or whatever. You got to keep pushing it, and it takes a lot of time. I have one client that's very successful with Kickstarter. Every project he does has been funded through Kickstarter, and I'm $50,000, $80,000, $100,000, and it's just a full-time job for that month. That's all he's doing every day, and not just him, a couple other people. So you have to take that into account, that it's not just I'm going to do this thing and make a video and put a description and post it and people are going to give me money. You really have to work at it to make it happen.
Yeah.
I haven't really used Kickstarter yet. We've talked about it, but one of the plans that we did go through was actually breaking it up in stages where, in order, we figured it we put ourselves in the perspective of an investor somewhat, and to say, okay, well, if I'm going to invest in something, I kind of want to see at least what you're worth or what you can do, So having to actually go through and actually maybe make a little trailer or something like that, so you can actually ask for funding through something like Kickstarter. But again, you have to promote it and do all these things. There's a lot of free work that you're still going to have to do. I don't know. Sometimes, to be completely honest, when it comes to budgets and stuff like that, as an independent filmmaker, don't think that you're going to make a better product because you have more money. Actually, I kind of feel like you actually make a better product when you have less money, because you actually have more creative freedom at that point. So like my film Warbird pilot, it looks great. It looks like we had jibs and all that stuff. No, we didn't. We just got really creative. We spent less than $1,000. And what I ended up having to do to get that funding is either I did it myself, or I would have to just ask like a family member, hey, I need to purchase this music, I need to do this, and by then I had something to show them. They're going, oh yeah, of course, are you kidding me? I would do this in a heartbeat. But there's that, you do need to rent gear, there's that creativity budget type thing that always goes on, but yeah, you just got to get your name out there, honestly, if you're looking to get money.
And if I could just add one super quick thing, there is a producer in Los Angeles named Alexia Anastasio, who does a lot of online things about how she's managed to raise money for all the independent films she's done. She invented a subgenre called blisscore, and all of her movies are very low budget, but she never seems to fail at being able to raise money for these one right after the other. And the same with a group called Bright Blue Gorilla that makes a lot of independent films. They're fundraising right now for a thing called Mr. Rodolfo's Jubilee. And the way that they raise money is, again, like we were talking about, it's all done in stages. That it's we need this much to move ahead, we need this much to get the editing done, and they're very upfront about what each bit of what's being raised is going to. So just if you're clowning around on the net, pop by and check those out, because a lot of their history, they talk a lot about how they crowdfund, and it's been very useful to me in getting out of the gate on that.
And one other really quick, don't forget also that with Kickstarter, you have to have incentives. So those incentives are going to cost you money. So when you're raising money, you have to raise enough money to do your production, plus Kickstarter is going to take their thing, plus you have to pay for these incentives. So even though you want to be creative with incentives, and I've seen some really cool stuff, you don't want to spend too much money on it because you're taking money away from your film.
Yeah.
Right. Just got to be careful how you budget.
Yeah.
We're gonna go. So you guys are working on documentaries, reality TV. So it might be that you have to schedule a production over the course of a year, 6 months. How do you go about getting all of those people in line when they're not necessarily working for you for 3 weeks straight, or they're doing one day here and then one day 6 months down the road? Like, how do you keep everyone cohesive and working towards the same goal?
Communication. That's what I had to do. It was very rarely like everything jived perfectly. So typically I had to bend over backwards to accommodate their schedules. And it was like I just had to stay in constant communication, almost over communicate. They were like, okay, I got it. That way I knew that they would not forget it, or had some other family event or something going on, or I don't know. Like, it's a tough one.
That's why we all look down the table at you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's hard.
better than what I would say.
It's hard for me because our crew was 4 people.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to wrangle 4 people when the two of the 4 are the ones making the film.
Right.
So it's really, I don't have any like pearls of wisdom on that.
Actually, real quick on that, there was so because we were shooting airplanes, and they're vintage airplanes, these things are old P-51s, P-40s, AT-6, stuff like that. They break a lot, and there's the whole point of the story is that there's a select people in the world that basically still know how to repair these old planes and keep them alive, So unfortunately, we'd go out to the ramp, get ready to film, and then all of a sudden, well, we can't go fly because the plane just broke. We were actually taxied out one time, and we had to turn back around because we just couldn't. It wasn't safe to go up in the air. And then it's like, okay, well, now what? So that we don't know how long it's going to be broken. It could be down for 2 days. It could be down for 2 months. So I always had to put myself on call no matter what. So I'd do my typical job, working at BBCom, and be shooting all day doing fitness content, and then I would have to get off, and I get a phone call saying, "Hey, the plane's working, and you want to do a nice evening shoot, when the lighting's just right." No, but yes, So that's you just got to be flexible.
So kind of working our way into the shooting aspect, how do you decide how much to do yourself, how much to ask for favors from people, and when do you bite the bullet and hire someone?
I think the irony for me is I will show up anywhere for anybody at any time for a ham sandwich. But when it comes time
Yeah.
for me to
Feed
ask for the
crew.
favor from somebody else, it's always sort of like you've wandered into a ghost town. Like, there were people here once. I don't really know, outside of just trying to be somebody that people remember and feel like they owe a favor to. Bank your favors, and when you ask your favors, don't make them disproportionately large.
I mean, that's good.
I mean, that sounds like the dumbest advice. You know, you could ask somebody outside, and they would give you that same advice.
But you're at the table, so you
That
win.
works for me. But I'm here. So.
For me, I tried to keep the favors to a minimum, and by that I mean I didn't ask anyone to work for free, but I wanted to pay them, but I didn't have very much money, so I'd say, look, you know, I would love for you to help me with this. Perfect example is a Full Sail grad. His name is Sonny Russin. He was our camera operator, and I was introduced to him by another Full Sail grad, and he's like, he's going to want to work on this. And I went to him, I said, look, I want to pay you. I can afford this much. I need you to shoot, you know, this event. It's going to be about 6 hours long, you know. And he was like, I'm in, I'll do it. And so he did a good job. And so we said, all right, hey, we're going to go shoot some interviews. You know, I can give you this much money. I know it's not, you know, very much or whatever. And he's like, look, I want to do this, and I'll work, you know, for the rest of the time, whatever you need me to shoot, you know, just pay for meals and gas and whatever, and then we'll work it out later. You know, so I think approaching people rather than going, can you do this for free? Can you do this for free? You know, just go, look, you know, I can only afford this, you know, but I like your stuff. I want to work with you, you know.
Well, and finding passionate people helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think for us, it's knowing who you're talking to. So let's say, you know, you're really new into filmmaking. You typically have to ask your friends or your families to be in your independent movies or something like that. But you know, if it's a family member, you know, trade a favor for them. It's like, you know, make sure if you help me, I'll scratch your back. I'll help you move to your new house or something like that, you know. But if it's another filmmaker, what I actually like to do is I like to trade gear sometimes because I can't pay you, and I make that very clear up front, and I don't try to beat around the bush. It's like, hey, listen, you know, I know that you don't have this gear. Use mine next time. This is how I'll hook you up. You know, and then obviously, of course, feed them. You know, that's the best way to get anyone to work for you is feed them. And then if you can pay them, you know, just be very open about that amount, you know, and the amount of work that you're going to ask of them. I personally I'm in the same way. I don't like to ask for favors. I'm sometimes terrible about delegating, and I sometimes take on too much myself. But that's mainly because I just don't want to be that person, you know. I don't want to be the guy that's always asking and never giving back, you know. Sometimes it is. I'm like, I don't have time to give back. I don't have time to help you move. I do have a life. I got my wife and my kids and things I got to do too. So I try to keep it to a minimum if possible.
Well, I think what Frank said about the sort of like even the gesture of offering to pay something. I mean, I've done things that were super low budget, like particularly like made for the web. That's kind of, you know, we were able to do a thing for SAG, that we had some SAG actors work for us. And the deal that we worked out through the new media contact, it wasn't very much to do it through SAG, but they all felt like we were treating them as professionals, even if they might be getting a much smaller check than they're used to for the day. We got a lot of really good people, you know, to say yes to being part of it. It is that gesture of realizing that, you know, asking people to do things for free is, you know, you would not believe how much difference there is between $0 and $50 for a couple of hours of helping you out. And $50 is nothing. You also don't want to be seen as a person who's raised money for something on Kickstarter where no one has any equity in the final project. Then you're asking for people to work on it for free, and then you're going to take it out and ostensibly sell it and make money off of it. That is not a fair transaction, and you will reap the karma of that transaction. So even just something is better than nothing.
I've offered services. I mean, now I have a post facility, so I've said, you know, if you can help me do this, I'll mix your, you know, trailer, or I'll mix your short or whatever, you know, and that helps.
Yeah.
You know, But as far as the other part of the question is how do you decide, what to do yourself and what to in my opinion, it's like, I know I can do this, I know I can do this. Everything else, I need somebody, like I'm not a camera operator. I'm not a DP, Call someone like him, and say, hey,
Help me out.
yeah, right? I'll mix your next thing. Don't have any money.
And feel free to call me, seriously.
So we kind of touched on gear a little bit, and I don't know how much you guys can weigh in on this, but there's this, ever-changing landscape of cameras and microphones and editing software and computers, renting versus buying. I mean, I feel like that's my question. Rent versus buy, go.
I am still using some older Canon product to shoot. For me, I'm all about the story, and most of my stuff that I make myself is either going to go to web or is for the purpose of promoting doing it correctly with someone else at the helm. So I don't think I would worry as much about the age of my equipment or whatever is new unless there's an absolute benefit to shooting with the new equipment. I think storytelling is storytelling, and as long as you're still, yes, I'm still shooting on a Canon XH-A1, but it still does everything that I need for it to do. If it does what you need to do, don't get into the hole of thinking that you have to have the best equipment in the world. I've seen people, shoot things on a Red, and it makes no sense for them to have spent that kind of money other than to have been able at the time to go out when the Red was new and say, yeah, we're shooting it on a Red. Who cares? It's congratulations, you have a nice piece of equipment. Can you tell a story with it?
Yep.
I think the way that I approach it and the way that people I've worked with approach it is be realistic about the money that you're making and the money that you have to spend on things like that. You got to pay your mortgage. You got to pay your car payment. You got to feed your kids, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I own some microphones and I own some, recording equipment and a boom pole and whatever, but, I don't own extravagant things. My DP friends, they might own a camera, but if we're going to shoot something, they're renting that $40,000 lens. They're not owning something like that, Or it's the other way around. They spent the money on the lens, but they don't own the body, and they'll just rent whatever that the lens can be used on. So just get a, weigh your options and figure out, okay, well, this project might call for, ABC gear. Well, I have A, do I have a friend that has B and C that you could borrow from and rent from, rent from your friends rather than a rental house. You're going to get a better deal, It's not insured, though, so you got to be careful and break your friend's stuff.
Yeah. As far as renting and owning, I do both. But here's the thing: it's like I'm the same way. Is that I don't have fancy lenses. I really don't. All Warbird Pilot was shot on the FS100 stock lens, and they were asking me at the ASC, it's like, what lenses did you use? I used one the entire time, and it comes down to good storytelling. And I didn't even have to rent anything for that entire project. I let the story go first, and I was the storyteller, through that. And there are times where you do have to rent it, and that's where you put in good pre-production and figure out this is why I need it. And there has to be a why, not just because you want to. I feel like some, like you guys, some people, it's more like a status game almost, like I shot it on the Red. Mm-hmm. Did you really need to, or it doesn't even make sense why, Yeah, you just got to find that. I don't know. To me, it's like a little bit of both. I think because I like shooting documentaries and I like being able, like a lot of times you just got to be ready to go. Like I mentioned with like Warbird Pilot, luckily we did have an FS100, so that way when I got that phone call, I could just grab my little package and go. But I didn't need something extravagant, though. That was the thing. I needed something that was practical. So I think that's the benefit between renting and owning.
Well, and I think too, just always take into consideration with the final product that you're looking to put out. I talk about being very lo-fi with the stuff that I do, but be aware of what the delivery specifications are going to be for that material. If it's going to be sold to run on television anywhere, it's going to have to meet a certain minimum standard for the video and audio, and just be aware of the level that you need to achieve, and maybe don't feel like you have to overshoot it, but you definitely can't come up short. I will not be making any features on High 8 anytime soon.
Well, and here's a tip. When you're in pre-production, do your research on the rental houses, because a lot of them, at least outside of LA, I don't know, although we did rent in, but we didn't do this in LA. A lot of them are closed on Sundays. So if you're going to shoot 2 days, make it Saturday and Sunday. You rent Saturday morning, you pay for 1 day because they don't charge on the day that they're closed, and you deliver it back on Monday. So you get twice as much time for the same amount as.
That's still very much a thing in LA.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I
Little indie
just
guys are
did it
always
last
on the weekend.
weekend, seriously. And actually, even if you try to rent online, so you don't have a local place that you can go to, you know, if you use places such as Borrow Lens or something like, it's pretty much the same exact thing. Where if you rent it on a Friday, you know, for 1 day, you know, you basically have to rent, you know, you get it throughout the whole weekend because you just got to return it back on Monday. So yeah, be smart about your pre-planning.
Yep.
So I'm gonna ask you guys to give away some of your secrets now. So, you know, time is short, budgets are short on a lot of this stuff. What do you guys do to make sure that it keeps the look, the feel, and it gives the, you know, I spent $100, but it looks like I spent $1 million?
Well, the easiest, dumbest thing is just get your master in 2 pops and move. There are people that I have worked with on little independent things where the DP will futz around for an hour while you have people standing there waiting to shoot. And what is the major difference that that's going to make? Really consider spending the time on your own, because it doesn't cost you anything to storyboard things out and to really map out what it is you do need. And just to shoot from a list is much easier than being there and just trying to pull it out of your colon.
Yep.
So that'll save you a fortune. And make sure that, you know, when everything's ready, there isn't any coming up with things on the fly unless what you had in the first place didn't work. You had plenty of time to figure out if what you were going to do didn't work. I think also, you know, you tend to overthink things because you want it to be amazeballs.
Right.
But get through it and try and stick to a schedule that you can set arbitrarily for yourself. I'd like to be done with this by 2. I'd like to be done with this by 4.
I would add 2 things. Light it properly, and make sure you get room tone, or if you're outside ambience, whatever, because it may not make it look like visually if you're not listening to it better, but trust me, when the sound is better, it looks better. So those 2 things would be key. It doesn't matter if you spend 5 minutes longer making that lighting right, it's going to make a world of a difference.
Yeah. That's a tough one, you know. Obviously, planning it right. You know, I never go out without a shot list. I never shoot from the hip. Even if I'm making a documentary, I've put in enough research to know exactly what I need to go shoot. And the thing is, even though you want to do it, you want to second guess yourself and go like, oh, I need to get this and this, or someone's going to keep suggesting, oh, we should go here, we should go do that. Stick to the plan, and that's going to save you a lot of time. Another trick I like to do, because a lot of our clients through ad agencies, or, you know, even if it's a documentary too, is they want fast turnaround. So what I do, instead of trying to set my gear up on set, I actually try to get most of it set up within a reasonable amount before I show up, so we don't run into that same situation where, you know, something went wrong or something like that. We're trying to set it up and everyone's sitting around waiting, because that's actually costing a lot of money, you know, especially if you're working for agencies and whatnot. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can add to that.
Well, and that helps with the lighting too, because if you
Right.
have everything else set up ahead of time,
Right.
like if, for example, we shot an interview with Tony Hawk for my film, and he's a very busy guy.
Yep.
You know, and as nice as he was to let us use his facility for the entire day, he only had X amount of time.
Yep.
So we had everything set up in the hallway without bothering him, except for the lighting. And so then it was bring it in, set it up, boom, and then it was 5 minutes to, 10 minutes maybe to light without him in there because he was doing something else.
Right.
And bring him in, you roll.
So and you had your lighting plots. Probably you knew exactly, like, going in it, like, because, you know, I'm a DP, I have all my lighting charts worked out ahead of time. I know exactly, it's like I need to put my key here, I need to put my backlight here, I need to do, there's always little tweaks that you're going to run into, but at that point you're just moving lights left and right, up and down, just a little bit, not trying to actually go, well, maybe we should put this here. I put in all that thought. I even know my contrast ratios before I even show up on set, so that way, we can get in and out as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So when you guys are doing your pre-pro and you're getting ready to shoot, what do you look for in your locations? A lot of lower budget stuff is shot on location because it's a lot cheaper than building the whole city in a building.
Right.
So what do you guys look for when you're going out, and what kind of things can you help tell them to look for to keep things going good?
I would say look for an environment that is not only good looking, but you can actually control it. As anybody here is going to tell you, that your audio is crazy important, and if you have to stop down and get things over and over again because of dumb things like trucks, you could have picked a better location. Mm-hmm. You could have not put yourself through that. I lost an entire day of shooting in a building that did not notify us that they were doing fire alarm testing that they do once every 3 years in that location. And when you're sitting on the floor in a break room with James Gunn and Jenna Fisher, thinking to yourself, I've embarrassed myself to the point of no return because I had no idea that this location would do this to us. Mm-hmm. It's pretty embarrassing. So just look for some place that you can really lock down and control that doesn't have a lot of crazy noise that you can't expect. Flight path at Burbank Airport, don't recommend it. Have been through that one as well.
Yeah, well, even interiors. I worked as a location sound recordist on a shoot last year on a stage that they planned out everything. Man, they had the most amazing light setup you've ever seen. They spent stupid money on lights and cameras and whatever, and they had the makeup all perfect and everything. And they told me, oh yeah, all you need is bring your boom, bring your mic, recorder, but I went straight to camera as well, whatever, and we're good. Showed up, man, that place echoed like you wouldn't believe. And it was just a guy talking. But because everyone's quiet and not moving, man, it just bounced, it ruined everything. And no one had, blankets to hang, no one had anything. It was like, I brought, what I was told.
Wow.
And that, caused a lot of issues. So even inside, make sure you check it out. When you're scouting your locations, check the sound, Like you said, can you control the lighting? Can you control the look at it? Can you control the sound of it? You don't want to shoot, facing a train station, unless you're shooting a train station.
Or next door to a dubstep festival.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, they nailed it. That's the very first thing that I look for is sound. I'll walk up to a location, and I keep my phone with me or a camera, and I start taking pictures. But before I start taking pictures, what I'm thinking for a set, I start taking pictures what's around it, what's behind it, what's not going to be seen. So you might realize that we got this space at this production studio. They have a cyc wall, 2 of them is a green one and a white one. I could do all this great stuff, but right next to it is a like a compound facility with big trucks going in there all the time. It's like, well, yeah, chances are when it's all quiet, you're going to hear that. But because, I took those pictures, I might not have noticed it right there on the spot, but when we actually go through and talk about locations, someone go, you see all those trucks back there? They're going to be backing up, and you're going to hear the beeping, you're going to do all this, and it's going to stop production. So I always think about the sound first. When I do go, if I have a sound guy, depending on what I'm doing, I bring them with me. So, because they're first, they're gonna check it, and they're going to check the reverb in the room, and they're going to see if they have that echoiness, and then of course it's going to determine whether we need to put sound blankets down, so we get better audio and stuff like that. And then from there, what I start doing is I start looking at all the little nooks and crannies of the room, checking to see, what kind of power is in there. Are we talking about, do we need, is this 110 or is it 240? Do I need a generator? Then I also walk over to the circuit breaker box and I check all the to see what kind of amps there are. If you don't know how to do the math to figure out what kind of amps you should, it's real easy. So just go. Actually, it's part of your guys' courses if you're film. But yeah, because the last thing you want to do, which has happened to me, is you're right in the middle of an interview and all your lights go out because you overloaded the circuits. what else do I look for? Then after that, then I actually I pretty much go to actual, okay, now that I know the logistics of the room, now let's actually look at what my set's going to be, or where's my framing going to be, and I start going into composition mode at that point. But if I have no good power, if I have crappy audio, you're going to produce a crappy product.
Right. So kind of staying on that vein then, so what other things can you do in production to make your life easier once you get to post-production?
I think making sure that you have someone there keeping decent camera logs for you is really important, because trying to find stuff forensically is a tremendous pain and a waste of time. So if you can get field notes, do that. If you have an infinite amount of time to make your project and you can sit home and agonize over every foot of tape that you've shot, welcome to 1935. If you can agonize over every card that you've shot in the field, then by all means help yourself. But it's just if you have really decent notes, it cuts everything down in post and makes it very easy.
If you have the time, get as much coverage as you can of anything that you might possibly, even infinitesimally, whatever the word is, need to use. Because once you get into editing, you're like, oh, I'd love to have an exterior of that building we shot in to establish a location or something. Oh, we didn't get that,
Yeah, I agree with that to a certain extent. When you're in documentary mode and you don't necessarily know the end result, yeah, it is to do that. We actually just talked about that in a panel where you don't want to do dump trucking to where you're just shooting everything, but you don't necessarily have a clear vision. Yeah, there's a time and a place for that. Definitely don't do that on every project, because then you have hours and hours and hours of footage to go through, and just going to look like chaos sometimes. So definitely, it really comes down to almost most questions how to avoid stuff is really good pre-production. You should have most of this worked out to a certain degree and have it go, well, we probably do need that exterior, but sometimes a client will come to you and they want to shoot the next day. That's happened quite a bit. So you can only plan so much, and that's in that situation, yes, you shoot the hell out of everything. One thing that I always avoid, and I really do hate hearing it on set, but again, there's time and place for it, is where here, we'll fix it in post. Well, is something that can be fixed now, I try to shoot everything real in camera to the best of my ability. I even have my colors planned out. I shot another film for Sony. It's called Zion. It was about the FS5. We had 3 days to actually plan and 1 day to shoot and turn it around in basically 24 hours for a trade show. But because I had it broken down to all my colors that I wanted, all my color swatches. That way there was nothing to fix in post. Everything was, spot on. It was just good pre-planning.
Okay, so we're getting into post-production. So there's lots of different mediums we can go to now. There's Vimeo, YouTube. You can still go to broadcast, Netflix, Amazon. The list goes on forever. How do you differentiate the way you do your post-production, whether it be sound or the way you edit, to bias it towards the outlet you're going to be showing it on?
Well, for me, I'm always it's just a matter of understanding what the delivery specs are for each of those and being able to figure out, if you don't have a specific place, there are a lot of things, we all want to make shorts and drop them on YouTube or Vimeo or little side projects and things like that. If you're aware of what's going to cover you, you can it's much easier to sort of downgrade your stuff to a certain level than it is to sort of figure out retroactively how to make, you can't improve what can't be improved. So always shoot to the highest quality that you can and then worry about sort of breaking it down to the places where the specs aren't as demanding. Not much to really offer beyond that. I mean, seriously. I mean, most of the things that I do are very low stakes. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm doing comedy shorts, for crying out loud. I live in the same, or used to live in the same apartment building with a Vine guy called Clarity that just would go out and shoot a bunch of noise on a phone in front of the building and turn it into something that 2.5 million people are going to watch. it's shot on a phone. I wouldn't have to worry about that sort of stuff. And most comedy stuff, things that are put up on the web that aren't intended to be released anywhere else where you're going to see it in a higher quality, why bother, again, going to the expense of shooting anything any better than that? So just be mindful of the stats for your delivery and meet those specs, and you're fine. The end.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to know how you're going to deliver, and what the specs are, and if you're delivering to someone, not just, YouTube or whatever, if they actually have a deliverables list, I need this and this and this and this and this, you need to make sure you're prepared to do that, and you set up in the beginning when you're editing, to be prepared to deliver those deliverables, because that'll save you money. So if you get an editor cutting a piece and just throwing clips, I'm talking about audio now, throwing clips on whatever tracks, okay? Now, when it goes to mix or sound edit, the first entire day is just going to be organizing tracks. And you just lost an entire day's worth of budget, So you got to be organized. But as far as, the rest goes, I think if you're not delivering to television or to, play in theaters, there's not really a whole lot of specific things on the sound side you have to worry about. Can you understand the dialogue? Does the story come across the way you wanted it to come across? And just get it done. But if for television, there you have FCC regulations you have to worry about. You have, peak specs and, average level specs that each different network has that required, may be different. And you have to worry about a lot, So it just depends on where it's going, really. Who are you delivering to?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, like I mentioned, one of my first questions, whether it's my project or someone else's, is where is this going? Where is it being delivered? So, for instance, like I know it's more independent filmmaking here, but it is very important even in corporate world type stuff where if you're making motion graphics, you want to make sure that is it action safe? Is it title safe? All these different things come into play. Is it going on a standard definition television? Is it going to go in a movie theater? What kind of sound, is it going to have? Is it going to be 5.1 or something like that? Is it even worth putting the money into that or not? Is it just going to web? If it's, if it is going broadcast, is it broadcast safe? Couple other things that we've had to deal with, as luckily I found out right up front for some commercials that we're shooting, they said it was web, but I had this gut feeling like they were going to come back and say, no, we want this for television now. It's like, so we shot it all in 24. It's like, okay, well, next question is like, we're going to send it to the stations and it all needs to be in 29.97. Oh, great. Now what do I do to do a pull down on that, And it's, luckily I figured out that, okay, I'm safe to shoot it this way at 24, knowing that it still can be played at 29.97. So those are things that I think about all the time. Luckily with web, it's kind of, for the most part, sky's the limit. There's not a ton of restriction, especially on like colors. If I'm shooting, am I trying to make sure, watching my highlights or anything like that? Because, you don't want them clipping if it does go to broadcast. The other thing that I also think about that I think is also an overlooked piece, if it's an independent film, or even it's just maybe you're trying to make something short, is think about it's just going to go to YouTube, it's just going to go to Vimeo, but think about the box that you're presenting it in. So if I show something on YouTube, chances are that, think about the user retention. Are they going to watch? Is it going to be like, they're going to watch 30 seconds of it and they're just looking for fun stuff and going to move on to the next one? Or is it like Vimeo where you actually have the serious filmmakers watching each other's stuff where they're going to be more engaged, more likely to sit there for 15 minutes and watch your work? A lot of people try to put it up on Facebook. I tried Facebook with Warbird Pilot. No one watched it. But I put it on Vimeo and I got 250,000 likes in a week. So think about the context in which you're delivering your product too. Since web is the easiest for most independent filmmakers right now. So.
All right, so working on lower budget things and personal projects can get very tiresome and break your spirit a little bit. So what keeps you guys motivated and kind of keep pushing yourselves forward?
I think for me, again, most of my career is working on things for other people. So when I have the opportunity to work on shorts and do, smaller things like I did with Non-Human Resources and some of the shorts that ran on comedy and NBC.com, just what motivates me is feeling like I have an outlet to do things that are creative. I started out thinking that I wanted to be a comedy writer and a screenwriter. And to be able to do those sorts of things at a very low risk level for myself, that's what keeps it moving forward for me. It's more just a personal satisfaction thing. I make plenty of money working for other people, but I just need that little fuff of something that's mine every year or so to kind of just keep my momentum.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat. I mean, I've literally done one thing for myself.
And it felt good, huh?
Not counting a video for a friend's mom and dad who had a 50th wedding anniversary, slideshow pretty much, But yeah, it's way different than doing work for somebody else, Now when you're doing work for somebody, you're editing somebody's thing, you're shooting somebody's thing, you're putting a little bit of you in it, but when it's your thing, you're putting all of you in it, If you're not loving what you're doing, then why are you doing it? For me, it was just I wanted to tell this story, and I thought it was pretty rad. So let's do it,
Right.
And even though, the funding that we were able to raise was this much of what it cost to do, it's like, well, I'm gonna have to eat that for now, time, not actual. I don't like I had. Tens of thousands of dollars to throw into it. But if I get it back, great, But I think, if you're happy with what you did in the end, then it was worth it, right?
I think what motivates me to keep doing this is I like being inspired. It feels good, and I want to be able to give that back and inspire other people. So I'm constantly trying to be better than my last project. And I said, I have my short-term goals and my long-term goals, but with each individual project, that's typically what I'm going for. Whether it's another filmmaker, I might be doing a vacuum commercial, but you know what? Hopefully, another filmmaker like you guys will look at it and go, wow, even though it was a vacuum, it was a really damn good vacuum commercial. Like it was lit so well. I want to make something like that too. So I always hold that expectation for me. And then, my long-term goal is to become an ASC someday. So that's what really motivates me. So, now that I know that if that's my goal, I'm gonna work really freaking hard to make that happen. And there's my wife can attest to this. That's like sleepless nights because I'm sitting there thinking about color theory or camera angles or just lights in general, and and I'll have these ideas and I'll get up and I'll literally start going on the computer messing around with them. I don't know, it just keeps me going.
All right, so well, thanks for putting up with me, but we're gonna get some questions from the students here for a little bit. So do we just raise hands? Is that the best move? So does anyone have any questions?
Check 1 2. All right. So my question is, how do I ask a potential investor for funding? What do I offer that potential investor for them funding my film? And I'm talking about a potential investor that might not know anything about filmmaking.
I would say the first thing is to don't promise them a return if it's not probable. There are actual legal ramifications to that. I think just have as much information at your fingertips as you can about similar projects, how they've been received. You're basically selling your film as if it's any other product. It's there is a likelihood that we will see a return on it. We're not entirely sure. I can't promise you that, but you have this factor. I have this C-list celebrity who's in it, which means that maybe some people will watch it. I've taken these precautions to make sure that this is going to look good, and these are the people who are involved with it and some of their other credits. You can make something look more attractive without promising something that you can't be absolutely certain you'll deliver. But
Yeah, and put that in paper. Get it signed. Seriously. Cover your butt.
Yeah.
Tell them, look, if I sell this film, for more than you gave me, you will get X amount percentage or whatever, of a profit. But there's no guarantee, and you have to cover your hard costs and stuff first. So you need to make sure that that's all laid out. Getting them to actually give you the money, that you got to be a salesman. I mean, that's hard. I just went through it with this film, and when we budgeted it out, we figured because of what we had with my facility and my partner's stuff, we could do this for $100,000, and we raised 20. So it's really hard. And especially if you're not going to put in the time, to make something like he suggested earlier, make something ahead of time to show them, and we tried to do that, using just archival stuff. But their subject matter has to be something that they're interested in as well, or you have to be someone they're interested in as well. If they're a family member or whatever, they believe in you, they're a mentor that believes in you, whatever, then those are the I don't want to say easy, the easier people to go to,
I've learned from experience that people don't mind being asked for money, but they just want to know why and where. And typically, if you approach it with a really good, solid plan of this is exactly why, there's not a lot of what ifs in the scenario. It's all thought out. It's maybe even it's itemized. And on top of that, if you can speak with passion behind what you're trying to get funded, honestly, it's pretty easy at that point. It's more of about how much at that point, But yeah, it's just a good solid plan. Just be very open, very transparent about what you're doing, and the fact that most investors want a return. That's the whole point of what they're doing. But you got to be very open. Just like you said, it's like you may not see any money, maybe ever. But sometimes and they might be okay with that because they might actually be trying to help your career. Yeah, I think that's about it.
But I'm not sure about tax law, but if you can make something look like it's something they can write off, that's always a super sexy way to come at it.
Yep.
So
We got two over here.
Hi. On behalf of some international people, I'm international myself, so for me, it's kind of hard for me to get a job, especially as a independent contractor filmmaker, if I want to freelance or whatever. So what is the best option for me personally? I know you guys are U.S. citizens, obviously, but I just want to know if you have any tips for me.
Where are you from?
My mother.
Yeah.
It's hello. Oh, I'm from my mother. India.
India. Okay.
Yes.
So when I was a creative director and DP for bodybuild.com, I'd get tons and tons of resumes and stuff like that. And I would get stuff from someone who just picked up a camera yesterday all the way up into, the super high-end professional at shooting Boeing commercials. And it was all over the map. And honestly, here's what it really came down to is that if you looked like you were working and working really hard, I almost brought in 2 people from India, actually just to do motion graphics. And we were willing to relocate them and do all that stuff. To me, it's not a matter of if you're international, it's if you're a good worker. And are you going to show up on time? Are you going to do the job I asked you to do? And if there's something you don't know, that's okay. Typically, most people know that there's things you just don't know. But as long as if you're told them, are you going to remember it and are you going to apply it? And so I don't have to tell you a second time because then you're in trouble. That would just be my advice: is just work hard, keep chipping away at it. Keep exploiting your vision. Eventually someone will say yes. Might get 100 no's, but someone will say yes, and that's all you need.
And find someone who's done it before to get advice from. And there's someone here this weekend or this week that's perfect for that, Ashish Manchanda. And he's in India now, but after he graduated from Full Sail, he worked in the U.S. for like 8 or 9 years in New York, LA, and Nashville before he decided to move back to India. He would be a perfect person for you to talk to.
Hi, my name is Carlos, and one thing I had specifically regarding with Warbirds and stuff like that, when you're talking about fundraising and everything, and you were saying just to ask them out for the money and everything, a lot of people in the business world want credibility. They want to know what form of revenue will be made from this film.
Mm-hmm.
What is the best way of actually marketing independent films to make a revenue so I can go, hey, I have a plan to make a film, I just need funding. There is a possibility for revenue.
The way I approached it with mine is that I knew up front that I wasn't going to make money from this. Still haven't. I've actually made $10 actually. Someone gave me a tip. But other than that, you know, the point is that I was proving to people that I know what I'm doing. So now I'm at that position where they know that, okay, if this guy makes a film, one, he can get it out there, because I did. I can get it watched, and I can get people to feel something, which is ultimately what we're going for. We're storytellers. So now I can actually ask for money, and say, hey, this is how much I want. And not that it's a guarantee, but it's a heck of a lot better than it was, 2 years ago before I made this, because I've got to have a following now, have a reputation, and people are going to be more inclined to trust me with their money, So I would say, in my opinion, is you're going to have to make those films that you're not going to get anything from. But again, being upfront with that. But if they're happy with that, you could probably go back to them again, and this time might get a return on it.
Well, too, if you're talking about making scripted things, I think there's a tendency here to, as far as the market, we think about the United States a lot because that's where we live, and that's where our friends are, and that's who we imagine watching this thing or buying it or renting it. There's an entire planet of people who are looking for content. So pre-sales, there are certain films, like there was a movie called War Pigs that was just out fairly recently. That film, if I remember my information correctly, which I may not, had been pre-sold into 10 territories to companies that would have the exclusive rights to distribute it within those territories. I think the entire budget for that film was less than $1 million. And it may have been less than $250,000. I don't know. I know it was a digital feature. You get a couple of stars that come in that work for a day, which is where a lot of the money comes in, is you get somebody that comes in so you can have a recognizable face that you can stick on the box. And those pre-sales, this sounds so cynical, doesn't it? Those pre-sales can often enable you to make a film. If you partner up with a production company that's done it before, or a producer that has some sort of a record, it's not a bad way to get off the blocks. And again, it's just having that recognizable face on the box and realizing that there's 10 or 20 countries that you might be able to pre-sell it into if you work with a distributor to get your money up front. It's a different way to come at it than what we've talked about most of today, which is fundraising and trying to figure out how to find that money here. But pre-sales are not something you should rule out, even as a fairly new filmmaker, because they're more concerned about, again, having those faces.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually trying that on my next thing that I just got. Yeah,
good.
We'll see what happens.
We have a question coming from our YouTube channel.
Troy, Frank, and Rob, on behalf of our students watching online, thank you guys again for your time today. I have a question from Stephen Deemer. He's a creative writing major. And Stephen asks, do you have any advice for writers who want to get their scripts made?
Ooh.
This is the point where the little cartoon tiny fart noise comes in. I think it's be willing to look to smaller producers, and again, maybe even taking the steps of figuring out how to produce your own material. Making something, anything, for the web gives you a body of work. There are more people that are getting noticed for small online things now than there ever have been before, and those lead to other development deals or to contracted work. I would tell you that a lot of writers, sort of the disease that you have as a writer when you get started is, how do I produce this thing that I've written that means so much to me? The bulk of professional writing is executing things that are given to you or delivering a variable on what it is that you brought in based on what other producers think that they can sell at the time. Making a few small things that are very personal to you that get your voice out, even if those are shorts, it's very useful in being able to sell your voice, and will get you other projects that will be based on your voice. When they bought they bought a Twitter feed years ago and turned it into a sitcom with William Shatner, and that just seems like the most incredibly bizarre thing, but it was something that was a project that somebody did personally that got a following that ended up turning into something else. Make anything that's unique to your voice, that's satisfying to you, but when you're talking about a feature, you're talking about a massive amount of commitment to getting something done. So you're going to have to learn how to be a producer if you're a writer that wants to see his own material produced. It's harder than ever to get stuff across the transom to people. I have never gotten into a cab and had someone say to me, wait, I have a great lighting schematic under the front seat that I want you to take a look at. It's always a script. Because, and I can't remember the sitcom, but they once said that writers are basically actors who are too lazy to go to auditions. So getting your stuff out there, all you can do is just kind of keep hammering at the door, but making your own stuff that can go up on the web where anybody can see it anywhere at any time is the best way to get your voice heard and to start unlocking those other doors in the experiences that I am hearing from my friends who are working writers. Does that hopefully answer the question? All right.
Another question over here.
Hi. I want to kind of ask about the web, like YouTube and Vimeo. How effective is that in kind of reaching an audience and getting yourself noticed and more work when you post things on YouTube and Vimeo?
It's awesome. So I planned for it. I think I've told this story like at least 20 times today. So when I started Warbird Pilot, they asked me right up front to set a goal for my film before we really even did anything. I mean, I had a working title, had a rough idea, but there was nothing on paper. And I told them, you know what? I want a Vimeo staff pick. And I think it was one of my instructors, they even said, why? That seems like was almost everyone else was, I want to get it in a film festival or I want to get it distributed. No, I didn't want any of that. I wanted to get a Vimeo staff pick. So I planned everything around that. And so that way, like, I really thought about, like, user retention. Like, the only way people are going to, watch my stuff is that, it's got to be in the right place. They have to be in the right state of mind if it's going to be in the web. I know YouTube, I didn't really plan on YouTube at all. It's on there, but you won't really find it that well because that we're just, the people that are on there are looking for short content. And this is about a 10-minute doc. So once I planned it out, I kind of knew, I figured out my target audience because of it, which was mainly filmmakers. My goal with the film, ultimately, yes, it's the Vimeo staff pick, but the underlying goal of that is to get noticed. So once I did that, it was a matter of when, it was a matter of, I just knew that it wasn't going to be a matter of if I got the Vimeo staff pick, it was a matter of when. So, and sure enough, I got it like right when I was talking to someone about it, and my phone just buzzed, and it's like, holy crap, it just happened. And then I knew something was going on because my phone was just blowing up with emails and likes and stuff like that. And before you know it, I have Sony calling me saying, hey, Rob, how would you like to be featured in Sony's Action Magazine because I filmed with their camera? Or, and then, I had now I'm on Discovery Channel, I'm on their watch list, all because they just, it got picked up on Vimeo. So, I mean, it's extremely powerful. I probably wouldn't even be sitting here today, a year and a half from my graduation, and I did my entire degree online. So I've never even been to Full Sail yet, campus. So I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the fact that I used an online platform such as Vimeo. So exploit it, use it as much as you can, but just really, really make sure you're putting a lot of thought into how you're doing it, though. And by the way, that's actually another tip is I didn't just put it up there and hope people find it. So I put it up there and I added it to channels and I'd send out like, hey, watch the people I friended. And I did that through about a course of a week, and sure enough, I got it in front of the right person, and the rest is history.
Question here in the front.
Yes, I have a question about doing films in Florida. Pretty much, I know that my goal is to build my own Christian production studio here in Florida, and like I want to produce Christian film. But in terms of like creating revenue in Florida, number one, is it difficult? Number two, in terms of bringing talent and everything through, is it just a harder transition, I guess, in a sense, to just build something in Florida than any place else? That's my question.
So basically, you're trying to start your own production company, right? And I hope I can answer this, because I think I'm probably the closest one here. I started Sky Tower Films, and I actually didn't even mean to. It was actually kind of an accident. But I could tell you right now, if I had it my way, I wouldn't own my own studio. Personally, I would actually rather be working for someone, because just know that if you do start a studio, you're going to be dealing with more business end of stuff, than you are actually doing what your passion was. So I have that problem right now, whereas I am a DP, but ultimately, because I have my business, I have to be a businessman first. So just keep that in mind, and it's really hard. If you're going to start your own business, you are going to have to probably find an investor. And because otherwise, you're going to have to do it the hard way, which is you're going to be doing it out of your home. You're going to be doing, with, okay gear and stuff like that. And it's going to be really hard to sell agencies that I can do this big project, even though it's ran out of your house, versus this other studio that's been around for 20 years that has an actors database and stuff like that. You're kind of a small fish in a big pond at that point. It's really hard to convince them. So, I don't know. I hope that answers your question slightly there. So, I don't think it's a matter of, because I did mine in Boise, but I don't think it's gonna be any different than if it's in Florida. In fact, there's just probably more people here.
Yeah. So. Well, I can tell you too that one of the things that most of the people I know that are just getting started, if you have more experience on the creative side or believe that that is what your contribution is, find someone to partner with who may have extensive post-production experience. Most of the successful television production companies that I know were started with partnerships where somebody is sort of the designated creative and the other person has all of the technical understanding. Authentic Entertainment, that does flipping out and lots of other stuff, is a company that they sold a large portion of their company fairly recently after a period of, I think they'd only been around for like 10 years. But the two founders of that company were Lauren Lexton, whose background is in creative, and a guy named Tom Rogan, who just back to front knew what production and post-production were. So if you find somebody that complements your skills as opposed to being another person that is partnering with another creative, you're probably in better shape to come out of the gate as an entity that can actually produce and execute things. I would even look to see if you know someone who has been employed somewhere else for an extended period of time in charge of production, because it will make you look more impressive. Everything about this business is about making yourself look like you're at a certain level of achievement so that people will trust you with their money.
It is a lot of perception.
Yeah. And so when you're partnering up with someone, you seem to have a very mature attitude. Find someone else to partner with and see, if that pushes you forward any faster.
Honestly, that's the only way I did it. Is my partner is the business, and then I am the creative. But we're growing so rapidly that I'm taking more business stuff now, like out of necessity. So it was kind of an unforeseen thing. It's a good problem, But it's having the right people in the right place.
Yeah, same goes for me. I mean, I don't own a production company. I own a post-production company, but my partner handles most of the business stuff, if our accountant doesn't, But I would agree and say, if you don't have to, don't now. If it's a goal of yours, then strive to reach that goal. If you really want to own that company, then plan for it down the road. I wouldn't jump right in right now. I would build your reputation, build, your career, and then aim to get to that point.
Question here.
Hello, my name is Anthony, and first of all, I'd just like to say thank you for all your advice and help. It's really clarifying. And second of all, my question is, for inspirations, who were your guys' inspirations, and what have you learned from them?
I'll start real quick. So my inspirations, Seamus McGarvey. I loved his work before I even knew who he was. For some reason, I'm just really, I guess I'm just really attracted to his look and the way like it made me feel. Even on the simplest of movies, which is Sahara, and this is, it's not the greatest of film in the world, but it's just shot in such a beautiful way. And that little did I know, is that was actually playing a huge part on the way I shot my film, Warbird Pilot. If you watch his work and you watch my work, I emulated a lot of it subconsciously, and I didn't even realize that. Some of my other inspiration is obviously Roger Deakins, and he's just a genius. Shane Hurlburt, all those ASCs, I really like that. But it's not just. There's another Elliot Rausch. He's a really, he's not a super huge name, but he is. I mean, he's not, he's a really good director. I love his stuff. I typically go to him when I'm just looking for just content inspiration, not necessarily visual inspiration.
For me, it's my family, my wife and my kids. I don't have a one person that's a sound editor, sound designer, producer, whatever that I obsess over. I kind of just enjoy all of them and, hope to emulate some of their work. But the reason I get up in the morning and, do 100-hour weeks, is because I've got a wife and 2 kids that, rely on me to get it done, even though they don't like that I'm gone for 100 hours a week.
Well, now I'm going to sound like a jerk. I would tell you that from a formative perspective, there was a guy named Chris Abrego who was the producer on The Surreal Life, which is a show that I had worked on fairly early in my career, who also gave me my first break, who would not let go of me for 3 years. That if I wasn't working, then, tomorrow you're a production coordinator, then you're going to help us with locations, then you're going to be a story producer, then you're going to do this. Shuffled me around and gave me 3 solid years of employment when I started. He built a company with Mark Cronin that became an enormous success, sold for a great deal of money. He's now one of the chief executive officers of Endemol Shine in the U.S. And the reason why I admire him is not because he became successful or had a great deal of money made out of his career, but because he took the time to work with me as someone who was brand new to the industry. And I think one of the things that you should remember, no matter what it is you're doing, is that kindnesses are remembered. There are probably 100 or 200 people over the last 15 years that I may have given their first break to in reality television, either helping them find work as a PA or getting them plugged in somewhere, in a starting story position or just some sort of a small entry thing. I'm not that worried about being 60 or 65 or even 70 in this industry, because I know that when those people's careers mature, they'll hopefully remember that I was there for them when they started and I can continue forward. That's the biggest lesson that I've learned, is just passing it on is the single most important thing, and I get all of that from having worked with Chris Abrego.
All right, and this will be our last question over here.
Hi, guys. Say you're trying to do a documentary or a short film narrative, and you have like a controversial topic that surrounds the main idea. What's the best course of action to go and try and find funding for that?
If it's political in nature, from whatever party opposes the thing that you're lampooning. I mean, not even a joke. I mean, just find any special interest group that has a vested interest in your project succeeding. If it's controversial, figure out whose side you're on, and you'll find people who are interested in promoting your take on that controversial topic.
That's a good point. I had a hard time funding my documentary because it's about punk rock and skateboarding, and they're just throwing F-bombs everywhere. And talking about doing drugs and drinking. People may not necessarily want to be associated with that, but some people just, that's their world, and you're just gonna find the people that have a passion about what you have a passion about, or what you're making your project about.
I don't know if I haven't really been put in that situation, so I really don't know. Closest thing to that is when I was actually making Warbird Pilot. Before it was actually called Warbird Pilot, it was actually about a museum, and part of that is there are some kind of graphic and stuff we had to go back into, especially with warbirds. They were fought in wars, so there was a lot of Nazi symbols, Nazi flags, and I was asked to remove them from my film. And this is in pre-production, so we don't think you should show that. But the thing is, obviously the nature of the project changed, and so we had to adapt to that. But ultimately, I would have said no. I'm not going to, because I feel like I would have been compromising my vision, my artistic vision. It wasn't about Nazis; it was about warbird pilots, and people maintaining this, this stuff in a museum. But I know some people they didn't like it at all, even though it's just showing a stupid symbol, basically. I think at that point I would just had to find the right group.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I want to say thank you to our panelists, and then we talked a lot about the work you guys are doing. Can you just tell them real quick where they can check out some of your stuff?
On television. Several of my shows are still running. If you're on Netflix, check out the 3 years of Basketball Wives that I worked on. You can look up the shorts that I've worked on. Look up Non-Human Resources on YouTube. There are a couple of shorts that I worked as an AD or second AD on that James Gunn did that you can find online. But that's about it. I'm on a different show every 13 to 20 weeks, so there's nothing brand new coming out. So.
Yeah, the answer's the same for me on television. I mean, we both do a lot of work for other people, so my biggest client over the last 15 years has been National Geographic. So if you watch National Geographic Channel or Discovery Channel or PBS, Smithsonian Network, actually they repeat it a lot. There's one of my favorite series I ever did called Bomb Patrol Afghanistan, and it was 4G4 TV, but then it became Esquire Network. So sometimes they'll run a marathon of the entire season in one day. So that's worth checking out.
Most of my stuff you can check out is at skytowerfilms.com. That's our website. You can also go to our Facebook page. My personal thing, I have also a DP page on Facebook. So it's this Rob W. Scribner. I think it's cinematographer or director of photography, one of those. You can check out some of my work. Some of the stuff that I've done in the corporate world, I say corporate, but I was the DP for bodybuilding.com. So if you go to that website, which if any of you guys know fitness, is pretty much the go-to place. So a lot of the trainers and Fit 360 and stuff is all work that I did.
All right. Well, thanks again, guys. Thank you guys for coming. Thanks for the online watchers. Enjoy the rest of the Hall of Fame. I don't know what to do with this.